So you're saying they are guidelines. That's fair.
Well, I thought they were laws because you could break that.
So you have open office on here?
I certainly would expect that I do, and I would expect that it works.
Okay. Cool.
This might be embarrassing again, so.
That's cool. If you don't have much battery life, that's definitely not a problem. I'm completely comfortable with batteries dying halfway through speeches. If anyone saw my DEF CON, last DEF CON speech, the battery died halfway through. It went really well. The outline was like solidified in my own head, and I'd already thought about it enough where I was comfortable giving the speech anyways. That's why the lack of a slide deck really doesn't terrify me. The fact that I can't hold down water because I drank too much last night, that terrifies me. But the Red Bull will help, I'm sure. Yeah.
We'll find you a bucket. Well, I think you can for alcohol.
Give me my bucket. I want it.
It's the Canadian equivalent of the Laurenti. Yeah, I know. I was picturing actually.
The valiant effort.
Go you!
I blame myself.
So, your presentation on how to copy files then?
Yeah.
Because we might get public.
You were using Windows
Wow.
Seriously? That's why you got a problem.
You know what? That's completely uncalled for. Obviously, because there is a strong element of truth to it. So, a brief introduction. I'm Dead Addict. Everything you need to know about me is really none of your business. This is a privacy talk. I have, though, given a lot of information about companies I've worked for to at varying levels of disclosure. Like at presentations, I'll tell you, I worked for, say, a dominant operating system company in the Pacific Northwest for several years. That's right. And I worked for a large financial infrastructure company that's one of the top 5 global brand recognition names. Not telling you who that is, but you know, in many of these cases, you can figure them all out. In the beginning and consistently, when talking at venues like this, I find it best for me and my employer to not associate with each other. So I don't mention them. They don't like have a problem with me saying whatever I say, and that's all really happy. When I started speaking at events like this, it was a lot more. There's a lot more at risk, and the idea that a hacker might be in a large corporation really put my job at jeopardy. And there was a legitimate reason to be concerned about that. The landscape has changed considerably over the last 15 years, and you know, I told my boss I was going to this. And he felt hurt that I didn't talk to him about it beforehand, that I wasn't representing the company. And I don't know, if any of you saw me last night, partying till 5 a.m., really, I don't want to represent them.
Depends on the company, which is?
Right now, I work for a large telecommunications hardware manufacturer and a software manufacturer that's also a dominant brand in its field, in near the Toronto area. I've chosen this path personally of trying to avoid having public mentions of affiliations. And essentially, you know, while we all can figure out all these associations, what you won't necessarily be able to do is put my name or my handle specifically into a search engine and find out any of these specific brands. And so composing a sketch of who I am, my resume, without my permission should be a relatively difficult task. And I've essentially tried very hard over a long period of time to make that so. But because of interpersonal relationships, obviously I get in a conversation with someone and it's really silly for the most part not to talk about your job and what you do and compare and contrast experiences. So yeah, people in the room have known places I've worked and know various personal details, and we all do this to some extent when we manage our own privacy by deciding the level of disclosure that we'll give people when we're talking to them. And it's essentially about establishing trust levels. This is interacting with people and organizations like your companies that you work for, that you have a voluntary association with, as opposed to the government and like telephone companies and people you purchase services that you need. All of those relationships are not really voluntary. You need a cable provider. Largely in this day and age, you need bandwidth. You need you can't. There's not enough room on sea land for all of us to gather there and avoid the government thing. So, yes. In regards to who I am, I definitely want to point out that I don't believe that establishing credentials really is very meaningful. I think there's a lot of people that have very impressive credentials and have very impressive associations who, if they got on stage and started, and who are very respected, so they have the respect of other people, and if they got on stage and started spouting what they would normally spout, all that would be meaningless as far as credibility of their speech, right? So Donald Rumsfeld or something Cheney comes to example, right? You can pick your politician villain of choice, but there's lots of people in industry as well. I don't really want to hear technical presentations from certificate authority salesmen because I think that's all bullshit, for example. And essentially, yeah, that's a whole another speech about how certificate authorities are selling trust that really doesn't exist. So I want to talk a bit about permanent records. And when I was a kid, I had this, I was instilled, and I don't know about all of you, I was instilled with this idea from early childhood of the permanent record. And it was a childhood sort of memory from a very early age. And it was an attempt to try to have my behavior dictated by the outside forces in fear of, for the rest of my life, really so, the rest of my life, my attendance record in high school would follow me. Was anyone here told this? Was anyone here told that, like, yeah, your future employers the rest of your life are going to go look at your high school attendance records, so you better friggin' show up? And I don't know, like, your beginning level jobs, your first jobs right out of high school, does anyone know of that happening? Does anyone know of a prospective employer going back to the high school and saying, well, what was their attendance records? So the first thing about permanent records, from my experience, was I was told all these things. I was told that all of my academic, so to speak, in elementary and high school, doesn't really seem academic and didn't to me anyways, would follow me for the rest of my life. So that was the idea of permanent records. It's a lie. It was a lie. It was all bullshit. And it was completely fabricated largely to keep us all in check. And all of that, it's sort of irrelevant because, you know, it'd be nice if I was, I don't know, I'm not sure I could give that. The same would be true for a group of 6th graders today. Like for all of us that went through school, I think that was true in the idea of a permanent record from that age.
So you regret attending high school?
The academic benefit that high school gave me was the illicit reading I did during class when I should have been paying attention, and a couple semesters of typing were really quite useful. So for us, I think, yeah, we can forget about that as a permanent record, but the idea of a permanent record is very real, and it's very, very terrifying, and we all have to be aware of it. And it's something that hasn't existed in the past. Our parents, our grandparents, they didn't have this, and what they had is reputation systems that were geographically based. So if you were known as a bad person, you could go to another town. No problem. You start over, and you're the new person, and you have to rebuild webs of trust and whatnot. But that's okay. There was no such thing as permanent records for social activities. Right now, our social interactions in an online context are permanent records. Things we say in forums, things we post, drunken rants at 4 a.m., arguments we get in, flame wars, all of these things, all of these pieces are permanently archived. And it's, unfortunately, I think from a risk assessment, one should think of this as all being permanently archived. It'd really be nice if we could count on it for archival purposes. Like, could I get all this stuff back that I said? That'd be really useful. But for archival purposes, all service providers are flaky, and you shouldn't count on any of the companies to survive. Another kind of permanent record, which is even less fortunate than everything that you might have said in any context or uttered in any context, is what other people have said about you. So which you have no control of largely. And furthermore, if you protest and if it bothers you and you start engaging someone that says bad things about you, you actually start to create a larger record. That record expands of that conflict, as opposed to someone just saying the shitty thing. If you want to deal with that, then that grows, that presence of information grows larger. So the use of a handle or pseudonyms is very useful, obviously, but one thing I think people assume when they use pseudonyms is that will stay that way. That, okay, I'm making up a handle, I'm using it in this context, and that will not be associated with my real name. But if you build up a reputation, and if you stay active in a community, if you are interacting long enough in that community, it's difficult to discard that handle. And then at any point in time, anyone you've interacted with that knows who you really are can easily kill that handle entirely, can kill the anonymity. And what happens with that is all of these things that you've been saying in a context where you feel free of repercussions of it not impacting other parts of your life. Anyone at any time can reconnect various identities and destroy the separation that you've tried to build up. Court records, like there's all transactional records of interactions with either bureaucracies or corporations are other permanent records. This is disconcerting for two reasons, or for a couple of reasons. One, if you look at every economic interaction you have with the outside world, you can gain a potentially better insight into the person has on themselves. And I think this is true for a large portion of people online, partially because of a lack of introspection, I would imagine, but also because there's frightening accuracy. Anyone that used Amazon for any amount of time can tell. And it's not 100%, but essentially marketers, what they want to do is model the human mind so they can hack it, right? That's what they do. So they know who you are, then they try to create a message that will get you to want their products and whatnot. So they're building up permanent records on everyone. They don't really, while they can invade a person's privacy to a frightening degree, the economic perspective on it isn't really that concerning. They just want to sell to you. So it's not any more malicious than that. It can get problematic when commercial interests who've been building up a detailed view on people for economic reasons interacts with the law enforcement or the government who has other potential interests. And the commercial data sellers are consistently willing to deal with law enforcement agents and be good patriots.
Without the fear of being slandered? Without the fear of being deceived or slandered?
No, I don't think I mean, in the case of the telephone companies, for example, the fear there is that they are outright breaking the law completely, right? And the accuracy of information is really, I mean, the credit bureaus and accuracy is another point that's important about the commercial databases that are created. The accuracy is horrendous, and it's being resold and repropagated. So not only are these permanent records existing about everyone, they're oftentimes wrong. And if you look at, is there a single error about the records about you, in some sense, everyone's permanent records are wrong. So there's all this information sets out there that are built upon about us all that are incorrect. And people will base their decisions, their credit granting decisions, whether or not to bust down your house and serve a warrant because your name was the same as someone else that had a warrant, deny you entry to a plane. That accuracy has real world ramifications. I'm not going to talk at all about how to make those records accurate. There's methods. You can work really hard and try to run around correcting all this information about yourself. And there are those people that have a passion to privacy that are willing to devote time and interest that I'm certainly not willing to devote. Of course, I'll talk about Facebook a little bit. Facebook is what I call the sort of a self-destruction of privacy. You know, I talk about the commercial entities doing all this various thing. This is all outside of our control. This, not entirely, but it's happening to everyone, and it's not very opt-in, I guess, is the way I would say. All of that is an opt-out, and if you want to not play in those games, you have to protect your privacy on your own. But things like Facebook, that's very much, hey, I want to play this game. I want to interact with all these friends and do all these things and leave all of these trails about my activity, my moods and things that are going on. And I remember the first time I saw one of these sites, and it wasn't Facebook. Facebook's, you know, a number of years after the first social networking sites. And I honestly thought the first social networking site that came up, that was a CIA operation. It just seemed really logical. I'm like, oh, wow, of course you want all this information.
Which one is that? Which was the first one?
I don't recall.
Oh.
Was it? Yeah, okay.
First big.
But I knew people that joined up to these. But I mean, essentially, what the intelligence agencies want to do is they want to map relationships, and they want to know who knows who, and what kind of interactions and what kind of relationships are between different people and entities. And that's how they kind of gain their intelligence on the groups they're interested in, entities they're interested in, and. This would all be completely benign, but of course the intelligence community in this country, as well as every other country, has a history of acting against its own citizens and having political agendas in their pursuits of national security. So, yeah, I really believe Facebook is a wet dream of the CIA, and all of these networks are. And I largely don't think there's a way to win with privacy and participate in any of these networks. I don't have any answers in this talk. I have some different approaches and different ideas. My general stance on leaving my own footprints in the electronic world is to try to avoid leaving any at all. And I'm completely antisocial online by and large. social interactions, when done, are done by email on a person-to-person basis or on very small private mailing lists.
That doesn't scale.
No, it doesn't scale. No. Yeah, I don't actively participate in online communities. I don't. And I haven't for years and years and years. And a large reason of that, a big reason that's the case is because I've been concerned about how one would be able to reconstruct the digital fingerprints over a lifetime. I'm not interested in people being able to have this insight unless I design and decide to give it to them. I'm not saying it's not an approach for everyone, and it's a rather drastic approach. Luckily, while I am a lurker, so I see what goes on in communities, and for the most part, I don't regret my decision to not participate in them. The communities that are worth being in generally have people that can articulate the positions that I have very clearly and do when relevant. And I'm really happy that's the case. So, managing identities. What's an identity? We don't have single identities, I don't think, I propose that we have a lot of identities that we use in different contexts. So we have our home life and the people we live with and our household and how we interact with them. And it's often said you don't know someone until you've lived with them. And I think that's absolutely true. People have an academic or a school kind of demeanor and persona and how they interact in that context. People have sporting interests. It's funny because it just sounds like things you would do in life, but in reality, when you're out bowling with the guys and you're drinking and having social interactions within that context, you will talk about things and you will say things in which you would not necessarily want all of the other aspects of your life to know about. The conversations aren't appropriate for those contexts. Your drinking conversation, bowling, I don't bowl, by the way. They're not appropriate for your work colleagues, or more specifically, your prospective employers to know. And maybe that doesn't make sense. How could you're chatting with your bowling buddies, your future perspective have anything to do with that? But I'm sure, how many here have hiring power, have had hiring power at organizations? How many people have used Google on prospective?
How many countries was that illegal?
I don't know. I've never been advised not to do that.
In Holland, it's illegal.
Is it really?
No, I laughed.
Yeah. Yeah, I do too. I use Google on prospective employees. And I'm probably more diligent than other people. I have reasonable, good Google skills. And I've certainly, I had a question about hiring someone because on his firstname.lastname.com blog, he chatted about his drug use in like last night or whatever. And it wasn't a question of, I don't want someone in the organization that uses drugs. I use his particular drug too. But I did have a question about hiring someone with the judgment to have that on their firstname.lastname.com blog. And I want employees with good judgment. I didn't bring this up in the hiring process, but I sort of, everyone had a veto vote. But I certainly considered it. Now, I have reasonable Google skills, and firstname.lastname.com is not ninja Google skills, but the difficulty now of acquiring this information about an arbitrary individual versus the difficulty of compiling a very complete dossier on an arbitrary individual, say 5 or 10 years in the future, is going to be really dramatic. I believe in 5 or 10 years we're going to be able to, you won't need any particular skills, and it will be ridiculously easy to create a complete picture of people's digital trail online and assemble different contexts in which they spoke and had conversation. So in reality, the prospective employer will have the ability to see the conversation you had with your bowling buddies because your interactions are largely virtual.
But won't it level the playing field then? If every potential president has had like whatever people we slept with and naked pictures online, then it's all fine, right? It's not going to be used against you anymore because every candidate will have those pictures online.
I hope so. I hope so. Well, I see. I don't want to have the one sick fuck that has nothing interesting in their background rise to leadership, right? But I mean, like George Bush's cocaine use didn't prevent him from getting presidency.
And like the girl from the Disney high school that had her whatever half-naked shots turn up. Like Disney used to fire anyone that even came close to pornography, and now they just have we don't care, it's her own private mistake. So even Disney, you can see already moves much more to we don't really care what you do in your personal life and what leaks out on the net.
Right. So you're absolutely right about, and I believe there's more and more liberal hiring practices. And like I said, 15 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to. Well, I'm not sure if I have said this actually. 15 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to be hired at a company with my handle, with my background as a hacker. Companies 7 years ago consistently said we don't hire hackers, which was a bald-faced lie and absurd, and I think they're just kind of mum and don't answer that question anymore. Now, I think they construe it. They can construe the question to be convicted hackers, and that might be the case, which I think is a legal liability thing more than anything else. No, but our danger, in my mind, of our privacy violations is what was said in Seinfeld as a collisions of worlds. And the real impact to our privacy is our own social interactions, having these pieces of information from one social context bleed into another social context. And I don't know if anyone here has used and uses LiveJournal consistently.
Who would do that?
So the interesting thing about LiveJournal is that there's filtering, right? You're like, well, I want to create this filter, and so I want this group of people to know this amount of things about me, and maybe lots of times it's very benign. Well, my sewing stuff is very very boring, and no one wants to hear about that. But other times it might be personal. It might be, well, I'm involved with this sort of self-help group, or this sexual interest, or this deviant religion, right? So the interesting thing about LiveJournal filters, though, is that if various folks are all on your LiveJournal, they don't know which filters they're in and out of necessarily. And I've seen this happen on multiple occasions very easily. Easy for it to happen is inadvertent breaches of information disclosure protocol, where one friend says to another friend, hey, I heard about that thing that you posted the other day, and they weren't supposed to know that. And it can cause social impact. And I think the idea of secrecy and privacy really go very closely. One solution that, from a personal perspective, is to try not to have secrets at all, or to try not to or minimize the secrets you have, and specifically tell people. If you have a secret, then it should be your secret. And if you post it to a small group of people in an online forum, it certainly isn't a secret in any real context, I would propose. When Russian mafia owns your secrets, they're not your secrets.
Depends on how much money you have.
Yeah, the other talking about future employers. Can I have a show of hands of how many people here have Googled a prospective partner or a prospective significant other before pursuing? It's reasonable. I mean, you know, when I talk about Googling a prospective employee to protect the organization, if you're not protecting yourself against, you know, you don't know, it would be idiotic. You know, if your friend said, hey, I Googled the person you're dating and they're wanted for murder in the next state over, and you're like, shit, I should have Googled them. More likely the case, though, you Google the person, and it's not that they're a murderer, it's just that they're a dick online. Which might be indicative of how they're going to be in real life. See, again, not leaving any digital trails directly myself, you have to get to know me to learn that I'm a dick. So, I think managing identities, and the idea of managing identities is almost instinctual for hackers. Largely because, certainly when I first became involved in hacking, there wasn't much legal hacking. There weren't Unix systems for us to get on and explore because we didn't have the hardware to be able to connect to them or use them, and there wasn't a legitimate way to access these resources to explore. So we were all breaking the law, and we're all criminals. And instinctually, if you run around online saying, "Hi, my name is first name, last name," while you're engaged in breaking the law left and right. It doesn't matter how clueless the cops were 15 years ago, they would have appreciated that help. So, but it's funny, so the people have different ways of managing their identities. You know, people, there's still people at hacker conferences that use their handles. Myself, I'm one of them. But I spoke at Black Hat under my real first name, middle initial. Others embrace openness in their interactions, and I think that's a reasonable strategy as well. Leaving no trails and versus being completely open and not caring at all. And my friend that got hired, and that was at a large financial infrastructure company that my pothead friend got hired, right? He had the first name, last name, and his whole philosophy and viewpoint was, look, this is who I am. You can judge me for what it is. I don't give a fuck, and I'll do what I want to do. And people may or may not have judged him, but I applaud the approach, and I think it's a useful approach, and it takes a certain kind of personality type to be willing to face everyone's judgment, as it were, and to be open with yourself online. It's not my approach, but I think it's a riskier approach, or approach you have to manage very carefully when you're trying to filter selective pieces of information from various groups of people. You know, if for example, if you are a drug user, don't ever fucking talk about it online. Don't blog about it. Don't have pictures about it. Don't say word one about it. Like, you know, is there a need for a community online where you need to bond about your liking the same kind of drug? Unless it's like a legal drug, don't do it. And I think that's a way to help worlds colliding too. If you put everything that you contribute to the online world with the idea that anyone will always be able to see it, even though you're trying to compartmentalize it in a certain way now, that will really serve you. How are we doing for time? Okay. Rock and roll. Rock and roll. One interesting change was putting, this was a changing point for me in merging identities, and that's what's slowly happened over a number of years from my professional identity and my hacker identity. As I do more and more security things in a professional context, it makes sense that my contributions to this world apply there and vice versa. And I remember putting the HackerCons on my resume, and it was a really, really strange moment. And it's like they all appeared there at once, and there were like years of them, and like speaking, and like all sorts of silliness. And it felt really weird to me. It felt like I was giving a prospective employer information I didn't necessarily want to give them. But in truth, it's really relevant to the work I would be doing. I showed expertise, or I showed knowledge in this area here, and I will in the workplace as well. I think, for the most part, when people think about the threats to their privacy, or think about managing their privacy and their various identity, the thing to discard as a threat, for the most part, with the exception of admitting to illegal activities online, I wouldn't advise doing that generally. The government is not a threat to your privacy, really. Like they are in many contexts, and I think fights against RFID chips and against unified databases and against government spying. I think that as far as the freedom and security, the freedom of this country, the government is a threat that needs to be addressed, that we need to fight for our liberties. But on an individual scale, they're not really.
Unless you happen to be one of the people they target.
Yes.
Then it all changes.
Right. Yeah. No, it's funny you should mention that. I was on I was 18 years old ago. So this is way before past the statute of limitations. I was on the phone with a friend of mine, Mind Rape. Very applicable handle, too. I don't know if any of you know or Mind Rape, but very applicable handle. And he's calling me up, and he's ranting about how they're out to get him. They're following me, they're listening to my phone calls. And eventually, I happened to be at my computer, and it was so amusing that I was transcribing his paranoid rant. Because that's exactly what I saw. I thought that his feelings of persecution were really based out of arrogance and whatnot. So the next day he was busted. I'm not exactly sure. Some telco fraud. Actually, no. I think I do know. He was busted for using telephone calling card fraud, like using some 800 number and then dialing out from there. The interesting thing is, though, he wrote a tool that mapped who owned all the 800 numbers. And you just import a database and put a little UI on it, whatever, big friggin' deal. But the number he was abusing was a company that was local to him. So if he'd used his own tool and saw what company he was abusing, he would have said probably, wow, I want to abuse a company a few states down as opposed to one that can call the local sheriff's department and have the wrath of God on me. We were living, I don't know if any of you know Gail Thackeray or who she is, but we were living in her jurisdiction at the time. And yeah. And
so was your phone a prepaid phone? Where I told you on?
No. That was my landline. That was my landline. This was like 91 or so. I don't know what prepaid cell phone universe you were living there in the Netherlands in 91, but. Does anyone have any questions? Any thoughts themselves? Does anyone have any ideas on how you would manage or attempt to?
Well, you mentioned RFID.
Right.
You mentioned RFID and its prevalence in monitoring and whatnot. What do you think about RFID viruses?
Well, I mean, first of all, I don't think there is a prevalence of devices. I think there's serious plans that have large infrastructure behind them to make this so. But we'll be a couple generations before kinks are worked out and anything meaningfully scary is in place. But the momentum is there to get there. And I think whatever infrastructure is rolled out where there's ubiquitous, say, computers, smart cards, for example, rolled out to entire populations, attacks on those will be done. And I don't think the attacks to technically disrupt those systems will be enough, because they'll just use their resources to create better systems and learn from those attacks generally. I think if we want to actually have any chance of dismantling such infrastructure, that we have to do so at a political level. And we have to make sure that the people that get elected and the people that we're paying with our tax dollars will say no to that. And I think to some degree, having articulate people that can articulate the technical issues and the technical risks associated with these systems have a good chance of delaying or disrupting the implementation of them. And I think looking at electronic voting system is an excellent example of how political action can change the problems in the electronic systems that are impacting our democracy.
It seems to me like every day, like every time I want to do business with a certain website, they want you to sign up and make a user account. How do you feel about that?
If they're not getting my credit card, no company gets any information that resembles any kind of reality, is how I deal with that. My interactions with the commercial entities, if I'm not doing a financial transaction with them, they're never getting anything of any real information from me. Sometimes when they demand an email address, I give them an email address I like to give is sales@theircompany.com.
There's Bug Me Not too.
There is Bug Me Not, yeah, and I use Bug Me Not, and that's an excellent resource to use as well. And when I have financial interactions with the companies, I generally just get over it. The companies I deal with, I try not to have them in a position where their business model is reselling my information, and not many people can find me. I'm a rather difficult person to locate. Huh?
That's the phone company's business model. Is the business model of entities you have, the electric company, whoever they are.
Right.
The business model of entities you have no choice but to deal with.
Right. Well, I would hope the electric company is a utility that's somewhat regulated and somewhat doing reasonable. And those are government-regulated institutions. So there's the telephone companies. As I mentioned, I work near the telecom industry. And for reasons like this, I don't like to publicly disclose my exact employer, but I will say the telephone companies are fucking thieves. And when I was breaking the law, like many past the statute of limitations ago, I regret not stealing more money from those fucking thieves.
Question here.
Yeah.
How do you not become that person people are looking for?
Well, one interesting thing, one thing I will mention about my approach and a potential fatal flaw in my approach in trying to stay relatively invisible is that I would imagine if you look at anomalies of data, right? My data, while there isn't much of it, is very anomalous, right? Because there's just sparse pieces of it and different locations I've been, but without full contact with the infrastructure that you would normally engage. So it looks really strange. So all of that work to become relatively anonymous is completely gone out the window, potentially, for the efforts of doing so. Yeah.
Are all your utilities, gas, electric, water, are all of your utilities, gas, electric, water, and internet, cable, etc., in a name other than yours?
No, I live in an all-inclusive place, but not for my bandwidth. My bandwidth is in my name. My bandwidth's associated with me. And luckily, I'm not in the jurisdiction of the United States at the moment. I'm residing in Canada. So,
Now you've given away your identity.
yeah.
Freedom so
No, I really think I would love freedom. I just have yet to meet him.
Okay, so
And you can heckle much better than that, Shardy.
so here's my real question. If you're not going to make a Facebook page for yourself, can I do it for you? No, it's a serious question. If you take every effort to scrub yourself from the internet,
Right.
what happens when an asshole like me comes along,
Right.
puts up a picture of you and goes, "Hey guys, I'm Dead Addict, what's up?" What do you do in that situation?
Well, if you had more assets, I would be more happy, I think, is how that works. I'm not sure.
Facebook pages don't have much content, so.
Oh, it's suable asset.
Oh, suable.
Yeah.
But how would you be able to, by taking action against it, you're playing your cards, you're making yourself visible.
Right.
And that's exactly what you're
Right.
trying to
Right.
not do.
Well, one thing, like I mentioned, I don't engage in social interactions online. I don't engage in social communities online. So I really have no protection to deal with there. So what happens? I come to a con and people think I'm a dick or want to point at pictures they print out about me online. Like, wow.
It's more your future employer, right?
Right. In which case, that handle being made fun of won't bother me as much. Right.
Actually, had his name legally changed.
So, privacy advocates like to push PGP, and, right? But isn't it the worst thing you could possibly do is having people sign your key and being in a key server? It's a permanent record. You can't delete things from key servers.
That
and
is
it's
such a theoretical question. I think PGP ceased to be used about 10 years ago entirely. There's no, that's not entirely true. I guess technically, I apologize to John Callis if he's still at PGP. A very nice human being. I wish them all well. But PGP in its original implementation, I think, was completely unusable.
I meant in the broader scope.
Oh, right. In the
PGP and its derivative.
So are you talking about webs of trust, cryptographic webs of trust and maintaining anonymity?
Specifically, the open PGP where people sign your keys, and those keys are available to a key server if you so disclose.
Right.
Once you do disclose them,
Right.
or someone else discloses it for you,
The thing is,
it's there forever.
It gets worse because without knowing you, I can sign your key and then your identity is suddenly hooked to mine, which is completely bogus. And everybody will believe it.
yeah,
I have a program for this.
So how does one deal with such,
well,
webs of trust?
yeah, and I think confirmed identities is the other thing, right? Essentially, regardless of what PKI you're using, there's an idea of authenticating who you are. And the moment you're authenticated, then your utterances are less deniable even and potentially legally binding. And if I was going to avoid general electronic fingerprints as a whole, I'll try even harder to avoid cryptographically secure digital fingerprints that are non-deniable.
only one or two.
Okay.
It's me. I assume you've heard of Rapleaf. Do you really think that there'll be a larger business model for people who are aggregates of taking other people's information and selling it for gain? Do you think we'll see more and more companies that are doing that in the near future?
Yeah, I mentioned before that I thought that there would be a completely terrifying, easy way to look at someone's identity. Rapleaf.com is an excellent example of a third party trying to aggregate your digital fingerprints into a single profile. And they're only the beginning of a trend that will inevitably continue. And I don't even think it has to be profitable. If it's just technically feasible to do so, people will retry their economic business models in reconstructing such aggregate information. No, there's nothing we can do about it, I don't think. Potentially, I don't know, I don't like to say legislation is a cure because I always get terrified when lawmakers get together and write new laws. Even if they had good intentions in the beginning, what comes out is terrifying new stuff from lawyers. All right, one more question, we'll go.
You say you can correct your information if you put effort into it. I mean, the companies obviously want to accept information that is correct
Right.
and share it. So why not correct it with information that bears little to no resemblance to the real world? Like, hi, my new name is, Bob Foonley.
I think there could be legal ramifications to falsely presenting information to various entities. I'm not sure I'm not sure the idea is to. That's an approach. No, I think that's good. I think I talked about various approaches, and I think creating noise in the system is another approach. One last thought I want to leave you with before I go is the beauty of names that your mother gave you or your father gave you. And if you have what I call a good or lucky name, you will be completely anonymous through hundreds of thousands of other people or thousands of other people having those names and having their own identities they're managing online. And it'll be very, very difficult to clearly identify a single person if you're doing a casual analysis of that identity. So y'all are lucky. Thanks for coming. I appreciate it. I'll be around.